Welcome to today's video. I will be going through the 12 books I read in 2023 because my goal last year was to read 12 books and I did read 12 books. So I've got them all laid out here and I will just be going through briefly, potentially something I learned from each of them and just something I like from each of them really. And I did also, for most of the year, take notes in this from each of the books. Although towards the end of the year, I did stop taking so many notes because I started focusing more so on using the highlighter and just highlighting parts in the book, because the thing is, some things that might stick out to you at one point in your journey or your life from a book might later on not be the same things that will be important to you. And that's why if you just highlight certain parts from the book and then you return to the book and you look through it, you might find that there will be some other different things that will stick out to you, and maybe those will be the parts that will be important to you at that stage of your journey. So in January I read Atomic Habits, and I'm sure this is a book which most of you, if not all of you, have heard of, if not read. And overall, it's a really good book. It's no wonder it's popular, because it's a simple and fundamental book for success, your habits. After all, your habits will form your reality in the long term. What you do will obviously manifest in your life. What you do consistently will then end up creating, on an exponential level, your success. So I've got a few notes here. I will point out a few things in particular because I took just notes in here. And one of the main things he goes over, it's by James Clear, that small habits compound, and getting 1% better every day compounds and is then, after a year, 37 times better. You're better, 37 times better at the end of the year by just getting 1% better every day. And the thing is that when you're consistent, your success isn't linear, it's exponential. And that's obviously because of the compounding effect, which he goes over in the book. And something that's important, and that is a recurring theme that I speak of, is the way you see yourself, right? So it's here somewhere. And it's that your identity forms your habits and vice versa. I've got it here somewhere. And that's because the way you see yourself dictates the actions you take. I've mentioned this before. And the actions you take then ultimately create your reality, the reality that you experience. So he speaks of this in a certain point where he says, an example is if you're trying to quit the bad habit of smoking and someone offers you a cigarette, instead of saying, "No thanks, I'm trying not to smoke," you say, "No thanks, I don't smoke." Because the new you doesn't smoke. So just say you don't smoke. And something as small as that makes a huge difference, because if you tell someone you are trying not to, they might say, "Oh, come on, just, take this one." Whereas if you say you don't, then that's all. You just don't. And there's also a tipping point, something that he goes over. And I actually have a book called The Tipping Point, which I have not read. And it's that, it says it here. Obviously, if you have an ice cube in a room, as the room heats up, it's only once it reaches 0 degrees Celsius that then it starts to melt, 0 and above. So from -10 to -5, -20 to -2, there's not going to be much difference. It's just going to be ice, just going to be frozen. But once you reach that threshold, that is the melting point, once you're getting above zero, that's when the ice starts to melt. And that's what exponential process looks like. And here he goes over the plateau of latent potential, which is that what you think should happen is you should have linear success like this. Although what really happens is you have exponential success, because at the start it's slower than you think it should be. And then eventually when things compound, you take off and you have exponential success. And this, as he says here, is the value of disappointment. And this is where most people give up. Because after trying something, they think they're doing terrible, when really they just need to keep going. In February, I read How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is just a great book in general, just about handling people, with people, whether that be people that are close to you, people you have relationships with at your home, people at work, people you don't know. In general, just really good book. I do recommend it for anyone. For anyone, I recommend it. And it's by Dale Carnegie, so as far as I'm aware, this is a book that was written quite a while ago, actually. And I do believe Dale Carnegie has now passed away. Although I think there's an introduction by his close ones. And yeah, Dale Carnegie was helping people deal with other people for a while. And clearly he was good at it, because it's a very good book. And there are a few small points I do have from the book. And I won't go over too much, because I don't want any of you to think that if I just mention the main things from the book, there is no need or reason to read the book. I'm obviously barely going to cover anything by just speaking here. But I do like how in Atomic Habits he has the summary of each chapter at the end. And as is with this book, where he has like it's like a moral of the whole thing that he goes over. Like the main thing he says at the end. So like one of the things, let's see. One of the things I'll bring up, and I'll bring it up because I remember a specific story he mentions in the book about this, and is that if you're wrong, admit it quickly. And the specific story that he went over is that he was once walking his dog in a park, essentially, and there was some kind of, let's just call him a police officer. They're probably called like park ranger, I don't know, but let's just say it was a police officer. And you're not meant to have your dog on the loose in the park. So, and there was a big fine actually for it as well. And the police, I do believe. And the police officer said, don't let me catch you doing this again. Next time this will be a fine, blah, blah, blah. And really just wasn't happy with him. Then essentially, from then on, he just had his dog in the lead at all times. Until one time when there was a very nice sunny day and there was just no one in the park. You could see it was just a nice green field, just green grass. And he thought, well, how can I resist? He just let his dog off the lead. And then lo and behold, as he went over the hill, the police officer was there over on the other side of the hill. And essentially what Dale Carnegie did is he, instead of, trying to avoid the situation or anything, he went straight to him and he apologized and told him he was in the wrong, admitted he was in the wrong before the police officer could even speak. And the police officer, because he was surprised that he did this, he actually just said, you know what, I didn't see this, just, don't let me catch you doing this again, right? I'm gonna let you off, no fine, just go. And the thing is, I actually like the way it was said in the book, because Dale Carnegie said, I'm in the wrong, I know I'm in the wrong, I'll just give me the fine, I'll pay for it. I know what I've done wrong, I've learned from my mistake, I won't repeat it, but I'll pay the fine. And then the police officer just said, well, you know what, it's not actually that serious, blah, blah, blah. And that's actually something I got from Alex Hormozy as well, in a way, which is that I think the example he used is someone in a shop, like if you're working Walmart or something, and then if an angry customer comes in, let's say with a piece of clothing, right? Let's say this sweater or this polo, and it was missing like a button or whatever. And the customer came in and they were angry, and they were asking for the manager. Where's the manager? And essentially, if this angry customer is angry, then if the manager comes over and pretends he's angry, so acts angry and says, who gave you this? Okay, we're going to fix this right now, blah, blah, blah. Like, acts in like that kind of way. He matches their energy, right? The customer's angry energy. Then what will happen is the customer will jump out of the angry boat and they will actually calm down. And this is also something I got from, I mentioned this just now because apart from these 12 books, I listened to 2 audiobooks. There actually were more audiobooks that I listened to, but I just didn't finish them. Like right now, I'm listening to The Power of Now. I listened to Think and Grow Rich also. And I started listening to The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, although I'm going to finish it after I'm finished The Power of Now, I do believe. Either way, something that is mentioned in, what was the book I was going to mention? In The Way of the Wolf, yes. So the 2 books I listened to that and I finished are 3, Think and Grow Rich, The Way of the Wolf, and The Millionaire Fast Lane. The Millionaire Fast Lane is a good book. He goes over how, most of society believes they're just going to put a certain small percentage of their savings in their 401k or, investing in stocks and all this, just average people. And yeah, it's possible. But by the end, you're going to be, you're going to have gray hair. And he was just saying essentially how there's 3 lanes. There's the fast lane, the slow lane, and the sidewalk, where the sidewalk is just you're completely broke and barely getting by. The slow lane is you're on your way. The sidewalk, you're just completely oblivious to, building wealth and all this. Slow lane, you're building your wealth, but it's taking you a while because you're just working a job and you're not trying to change things. Now, I'm not saying working a job is a bad thing, and I'll circle back around to this in one of the other books. But they're just not trying to change anything. They're just putting their money aside, they're just saving and that's all. They're not taking any, drastic action to change their situation. But the reality is there is actually a fast lane where if you actually put in the work, you can become a millionaire in 5 or 7 years. I truly believe anyone can make $1 million in 5 or 7 years. And that's not just my opinion. I've heard this from Roger James Hamilton. He says it in this book in one way or another, and I've heard it from other people, and it's true. And that's why I've not given up on my journey. Now, I'm going off on big tangents, but at least I'm not forgetting what I was going to say. In The Way of the Wolf, his son, Jordan Belfort's son, was angry about, some other boy that was playing unfairly in football. And instead of saying, oh, well, what's wrong? Let's talk about it. Then what he would have done or did do a previous time is, leave me alone, blah, blah, blah. That's just how kids are, and some other people, grown-up people, are also. It's true. Whereas matching his energy, he then stepped down or got out of the angry boat, you could say. Alex Hormozy put it in this way, I'm pretty sure. By matching his energy, he, took a step down. And then what Jordan can then do is also take a step down and then speak to him on a normal level instead of, begging him to, calm down, let's talk about this in a normal way, right? Now let's move on. In March, I did not read a book. I had family over and I had to read an extra book at some other point later on in the year. And I will mention now, I made it a commitment to read one book a month, or it was actually like 10 pages a day, which for most books is one book a month. Last year, it was a year ago in November, well, it was 2022, November, December, and I started with Power, the 48 Laws of Power, in November because my mom got me it. And I will say, if you're starting your journey, this probably is not a great book to just start with because it's very dense, I will say. Although I came back to this book, I read at certain points like a law a week or something, or a day, I'm not sure, but either way I finished it. And what I did commit to at the end of 2022 was to read Shoe Dog. I read Shoe Dog in December at the end. Either way, then after March, I didn't read anything. In April, I read The Psychology of Money. I don't have this book because I borrowed it from a friend, and I will say it's an alright book, although not the best book ever, in my personal opinion. You can get some valuable things in there about thinking about money in certain ways, as it is called The Psychology of Money. And overall, yeah, I would say, read just about any non-fiction book you can get your hands on. Or maybe not any, there are some, maybe you should avoid and take recommendations, but don't always take people's word for, I recommend this book, this one, and this one, right? Still try and read other ones. There might be some stuff that might apply to you differently in books that other people don't recommend. I'm just saying, for me personally, The Psychology of Money was not the best book ever. Then in May, I read The Courage to Be Disliked, which is a very interesting book because it's different from most books in that it's actually a dialogue between a young boy and a philosopher. And it's a very nice read, actually. It's not super dense. It's only 250-ish pages long, and I would recommend it for sure. Right now, there's a bookmark. My brother is reading this book. I've given it to him, and I also got him a good few books for Christmas, like the Rich Dad Poor Dad, Think and Grow Rich, and The Alchemist, the Millionaire Masterplan, which I've just read at the end of this previous year, and a few other books. And I would say I recommend this book because the philosopher is, especially if you're a younger person, he's a wise man. And I've got a few notes here from the book, right here. And that's that you should actually discard other people's tasks, which is called, as he says in the book, separation of tasks rather. And that's that if you see something going on, and sometimes you should think, well, that's not even my situation, it's not my business, it's not going to change my life if I step into this and try and force them to do something else. I'll just let them be, right? And that's something that's important in my life, living at home with my family, and especially my brother. It's very useful. And also about creating horizontal relationships. So do not rebuke or praise, because even if you praise, supposedly, he says in this book, you're putting that person above you, or rebuke, you're putting them below you. So instead, create horizontal relationships by just being grateful for people that you have around you. And it also mentions things like, life is not a competition, just keep moving forward and compare not, because it's true, you shouldn't compare. And I'm not going to mention everything from the book, but it's a very good book. I do recommend it. The next one was in June. In June, it was The Superior Man, or The Way of the Superior Man, which I recommend for any man. I think it's a great book where he goes over just masculinity, which I believe we need more of nowadays. And in general, it's really not long. It's less than 200 pages long, where although it's slightly, you might say, taller than some other small books, it's really not long and shouldn't take you long to read either. And one of the main things, or maybe not the main things, but one of the points that he mentions in the book is by David Data, is that as a male you should live at your edge, or just past your edge. And that living at your edge is where you're going to be growing the most, because you're uncomfortable, you're putting yourself out there, but at the same time, you're not way past your edge, where you're just taking ridiculous risks and, you're not even able to metabolize them. So I have it right here. Lean just beyond your edge, own your fear, and lean just beyond it, but not so far you can't metabolize your experience, slightly beyond fear and discomfort, starting now, constantly. And an example I briefly touched earlier is, if you want to start a business, I'm not a person or an advocate of, just, walk out to your job, just quit your job and try drop shipping when you've never even barely even, you've not tried it. Instead, I think you should lean just beyond your edge. So that's obviously just like completely stepping out beyond, just throwing yourself off the edge. Instead, if you lean just beyond the edge, what you'll be doing is you'll be building up your business while you're working your job. And what you can do is, once your business or your side hustle, your project, whatever it is, builds a sufficient income that matches or surpasses your income from your current job, then it's reasonable to quit your job, right? If this thing is, I would say at least 3 consecutive months is a very good, thing to aim for. If your side hustle business matches your income from your job or surpasses it for 3 consecutive months, then I would say it's reasonable to just quit your job. And that's you leaning just beyond your edge, because you're changing, you're changing something in your life. You haven't just accepted your reality, you're pushing to actually change your reality by still working your job as is reasonable, but also building something else on the side to get you out of that. Now, the next book in July was The Unfair Advantage, which I would say is a good book, although it's definitely not one of my favorite ones from this list. It is a good book though, overall. It goes over, as it says here, unfair advantage, where I will mention one of my favorite quotes from the book is with, let's see where it is. I'm going to try and remember it. There we go. With a place to stand and a lever long enough, I can move the world. And what that means is, if you use leverage, you can multiply your impact exponentially. Now, how do you utilize leverage? So each of us has something we can, as it says in the book, we have our own unfair advantage. Everyone has something of their own. Now, the things it goes over is, it has a miles framework. Maybe not framework's probably the wrong word, but the M is money. Maybe you're someone who's capital and you have or can easily raise. Obviously, for most businesses, you are going to need some money. If you don't, because truly it's possible to make money with no money using things like TikTok nowadays. You are still going to need money for your basic expenses, such as for your expenses, either way. And the thing is, money is something, if you're watching this, I would assume you have a phone or some kind of device you're watching this on and an internet connection, presumably. So if that's you, then you can start a business in this day and age. You just can, it's true. And if you don't want to start a business, you can make money from other projects, freelancing, whatever it may be. It's possible. Okay, just do your research. There's plenty of information out there because we're in the information industry nowadays, where the thing is, nowadays it's not a lack of information that's the issue. It's a lack of attention and focus that is the issue. People have so much information, they're just overwhelmed by everything. They just don't know what to choose. And they're kind of just ignorant and oblivious to the information we have and the opportunities we have nowadays. Now, the next one, aside from money, is intelligence and insight, where this includes book smarts, social and emotional intelligence, creativity. So book smarts, obviously you can up your book smarts by reading books. Social and emotional intelligence, getting yourself out there, getting to know people, how people work, by reading books like this one and many other books, and actually interacting with people, obviously. And then creativity. Now, by no means do you need all of these things. This is not like a checklist. This is just, some people are gonna have some of the things, others are gonna have other things. So creativity, I'm right-brained personally, so I have some creativity on my end. You might be left-brained, maybe you're not super creative, you just prefer to get down in the details, that's fine. Some of these other ones are gonna suit you, or you're going to be able to leverage more instead. Location and luck is essentially just right place at the right time, where I would assume if you're watching this and you're listening to me, you know English. I'm fortunate enough to have moved to an English-speaking country, so that's my part of right place, right time. And also it's the right time in that, in this day and age, it's really just very possible to make something out of yourself, as I just mentioned. Next one is education and expertise, where that's just formal and self-learning, intellectual and technical know-how. So that's any courses, any, like it says here, formal schooling you might take. For some, some people might want to become a doctor. Although this channel, what I, plan to help people with, or the journey I'm on, is, just building something of your own, right? Whether that be business, some kind of other career. But some people, for which I don't think you need university, 100%. But some people might just want to become doctors, and they know, down to their hearts, they just know that's what they want to do, and that's fine. Perfectly fine. And if you need a degree for that, then go out and get your degree. And then status is just social status, network, personal brand. And the thing about this is this includes your inner status. So as I mentioned when I was talking about atomic habits, inner status, the way you see yourself, right? So that plays a big part once again. It's a recurring theme. Social status, network, personal brand. Personally, I don't have a personal brand at the time of filming this, like a big one. Some of you might, who knows? That's something you can always leverage. It's very true. If you already have an audience, you can monetize the audience and you can make big money. Personally, I'm a firm believer of, integrity. So I don't think you should ever push anything to your audience you don't believe yourself is a good product or is something that is created by people with morals and high standards and integrity. there's something from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People where he says, all things are created twice, where they're created once in the mind and once in reality. And I did write a tweet about this where I said, be conscious, or at least, create your own things, be the creator of those things. But also, if you're not, and if you're working a job, be conscious of whose brain, whose head this thing you're working on came from, and if they have the same morals and the same standpoint as you, right? Without just obliviously working on something. First gets to know the person. Where did this come from? Why is this, a goal, a mission, right? Working on this. And all of these things are built on the foundation of mindset, where you have the most control. Now, the next book is the Almanack of Naval, Ravikant. I will speed things up because it's half an hour already. But this is a really good book, really, really good book. There's a ton of very good knowledge in here. I will not really go into anything specific, really. Random thing I came across here is, if you have 2 choices to make and they're relatively equal choices, take the path more difficult and more painful in the short term. And the reason for that is because if it's more difficult and painful in the short term, most likely there's a higher upside, or at least on the long term it's going to be less painful and less difficult on the long term than after. And really, it's just a great book about both wealth and happiness. Recommend this highly. Next book is Influence. You've probably heard of this one, by Robert Cialdini or Cialdini. This is a thick book, this one, because this is the expanded one. Highly recommend this book as well. It just goes over things, psychological things like reciprocity, liking. If people like you, there's a ton of examples, summaries. It's an extremely good book that I would 100% recommend to anyone. And it's also just about like how people, act in ways that people that are either similar to them act, or if many people are acting in a certain way. I did just mention reciprocation. There's a lot here. Next one was Never Split the Difference. This is once again a really, really good book. I really recommend this. This one is written by Eric Jorgensen, and it's obviously just quotes and tweets and everything from Naval Ravikant, which is just a very valuable person to listen and read from. This one by Chris Voss is a very, very good book about labeling and just a lot about negotiation. And this is important for not just, FBI situations like Chris Voss used it from, but also business, where loss aversion plays a big role in how people act, as is mentioned in this book. And he mentions things like mirroring, which is a very good technique, and labeling. I think I did just mention labeling. Honestly, this book blew my mind with some of the things. It's incredible. It's just truly incredible. Highly recommend this book. Next one was the Personal MBA, which I recommend for anyone who's getting into business. I wouldn't say this is like Alright, I don't want to say too much because it's a very good book. All I'm saying is it's not my favorite book from this list, although it's probably in the top half, maybe not, somewhere in the middle. But it's less so, a fun book and more so just very good, just packed with value. Now, saying that, it's not like super boring or anything because it's broken up in a very good way. but it speaks about not just systems within business, but also people themselves, because obviously people make up businesses and people buy from businesses. That's how business works. And it covers a lot here. Very good book. It covers everything from psychology, systems, things like, financing, so accounting and so on and so forth. Very good book. Instead of getting an MBA, read this book. Next one was Scientific Advertising by Cloud C. Hopkins. And this one is actually one it seems written a while ago. It's based on principles from old advertising, but nevertheless, it's a good book. It's not like insanely good, personally, I don't think. However, there's some very good principles and foundational things in here. It's a very good book. The 48 Laws of Power. I'm sure you've heard of this book. It's a very dense one, like I said. It's, as you know, with great power comes great responsibility, so use this to your advantage once reading this book, but in a moral way with integrity and not for destruction, because that's what power can be used for. And one of the books I do plan to read is Power versus Force, where with force you're forcing people to do things like a dictator, whereas if you have great power and you know how to utilize the power in moral ways, you can get people to do things you want them to do with them wanting to do them themselves, right? And at the end, I read this one in a week at the end after Christmas. I made that a challenge for myself. The Millionaire Masterplan. I do recommend this book because it's very interesting in that it's very personalized. You take a test online to find what your specific strengths are, whether you're a dynamo, a blaze, a tempo, or what's the other one? Tempo, is it steel? There's 4 different personality types, where blaze is the extroverted, and then the opposite was just introverted. Let me just get this precisely, so I'm not just speaking random things. And I really like I like personalized books, where he speaks about how you might think hearing advice from certain people like Bill Gates, who has 150,000 employees, that's what I must do to be rich. I must have many employees. Whereas someone else, I think it might have been Warren Buffett, someone like that, he's also a billionaire, but he only has 14 on his team. So there's dynamo, blaze, tempo, and steel. Yes, I was right. And great book overall, I would say, 100%. And it's actually, there's 9 levels, as you can see here, from infrared to indigo, on building wealth. Where infrared, you're in debt, essentially. Red, you're barely getting by. Orange, you're just on the positive. Yellow, you're really beginning to have positive cash flow. And a green, blue, and above there, you've got good businesses, where in blue you've got people working under you, you manage people. Great book. Well, that's all. My goal for this year is to read 24 books, so probably be doing this kind of thing at the end of this year. And that's all. This video's been 40 minutes, so hope you found it valuable. I hope you go away and read some of these books. Maybe not. Maybe you want to read some other ones. Perfectly fine. Thank you. That's all for today.